Jennifer Kubota to have us here and to be part of our podcast.
Great. Thank you so much.
What do you think there are safe spaces on this campus?
On this campus, I think campus is a safe space. You can express what you want and say what you want, and you'll be fine. If your views are very non-liberal, you'll probably be retaliated somehow by being ignored or pushed aside. But that's true of any place, and that doesn't make it less safe or more safe here. So the distribution of points of view, say politically, are not equal, and therefore people may not feel safe, but I think it is a safe space.
Do you think that all people feel the same way? Do you think minorities on campus feel like they need a safe space, or that it is a safe space?
As a Hispanic, I think it is a safe space for me. I can imagine why it would not be a safe space for certain religions, for example. Again, anything that's non-liberal will probably be in question here. At the same time, I don't think that campus specifically would, for those people who would not feel safe, I don't think campus specifically will make them feel less safe than in general, say, in the city of Chicago, expressing their views or feeling safe.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah.
So do you think trigger warnings are necessary in class? So a trigger warning would basically be, say you're going to talk about rape in class, then to inform students beforehand that this is the subject we're going to be talking about, and if you're not comfortable, then you can leave or something like that. So do you think that's necessary?
I think the foundation of this university conceptually is to be exposed and not just express your opinions. So forewarning is important, just to get people emotionally prepared. No one should be forced to sit in something they don't want to, but at the same time, for the sake of learning, they should be exposed to more points of view.
Okay, thank you so much.
So for me, a trigger warning is essentially a statement given by the instructor before going into any material about what sorts of things they might encounter in the reading or in the discussion that could potentially cause them to have a negative or unpleasant reaction. But again, I find that trigger warnings have a valid reason in certain spaces, but I think when you're talking about texts, if you give a trigger warning before signing a text, you maybe be defeating the purpose for reading the text and just getting the reaction that's intended from the text.
Okay, cool. And does the term microaggression mean anything to you?
Definitely.
And if you could just speak a little loud so that we kind of cancel out all the rest of the noise around us.
I do believe there are microaggressions. To me, it's anytime someone uses not necessarily derogatory terms, but comes close to doing so in a way that inadvertently sometimes impacts the mindset of another individual. So, for instance, man up, right, is a microaggression, especially if it's directed at someone who might be considered to be more on the femme spectrum of gender expression or whatever.
Do you feel like you've ever been the victim of a microaggression?
Here on campus, I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of, but I'm also pretty oblivious most of the time.
Cool. Well, I think that's it. Okay. And what is the expression? What do microexpressions mean to you?
Well,
microaggressions.
Microaggressions. Okay.
Microaggressions, not microregressions.
Micro what? Sorry.
Microaggression.
Aggressions. Okay. Well, a microaggression, dividing the word, we're going to have two different things. Micro, which is something super small, and aggression, which is a felony. It's an attack against someone. So will be a super small attack.
Time for our think piece. What if we think one last time about safe spaces, trigger warnings, and microaggressions? What if when we consider these words, we also consider what they mean and what they mean in context? The truth is that these concepts and contexts have always been there, and we have always been fighting about them. The difference of today is that we have different words, such that the old concepts have been reborn into new contexts. This is a fight in which both sides will always lay claim to victory and defeat. We must acknowledge that we have both progressed greatly since the dawn of human debate and recognize that we have so much further to go. Specifically when it comes to safe spaces, there are two key types: physical safe spaces and non-physical safe spaces. In the real world, the truth is that not every space is a physically safe space. We live in the south side of Chicago, and the south side of Chicago is not a physically safe space. It is difficult to discuss other types of safe spaces when physical safe spaces are hard to come by. Moreover, sometimes the world is better for not having a physically safe space. For example, athletes at universities across the country play violent, physically damaging sports. Clearly, athletes gain from the existence of non-physically safe spaces. Otherwise, they wouldn't engage with them. In contrast, physically safe spaces are essential to the flourishing of life. Without physical safety, civilization would collapse as people break out into the state of nature and survival of the fittest returns as the law of the land. Today, a big part of the debate for safe spaces is for physical safe spaces. Minorities and marginalized groups do not feel physically safe. There are real attacks on their persons in ways and at rates that those in the majority do not experience. When we do not guarantee physically safe spaces, and not simply through raw power or enforcement, but also through remedies, affirmative action, and reparations, we see fear rule in our hearts. Regarding non-physical safe spaces, we must similarly recognize that fighting an ideological battle when we have already all ceded ground to both sides is largely an exercise in needless agitation. Do we not broadly recognize kindergartens as places protected from language about sex and violence? Do we not broadly recognize that people have the privacy protections afforded to them within their home? Trigger warnings have caused equally useless anguish. For all intents and purposes, every syllabus or foreshadow is equivalent in effect as a so-called trigger warning, the only difference being the purpose is to specifically inform such that trauma is not triggered. At the same time, we never expect a teacher to give such a detailed trigger warning that they reveal all of the course material. Otherwise, what is the point in having the students sit in class and learn by trial and error? Microaggressions are truly the epitome of our present folly. Microaggressions have always existed, and they have always coexisted with actual aggressions. Furthermore, microaggressions do physical harm over time. The success of society in tamping down actual aggressions has led to a focus on microaggressions, which thus perpetuates the myth that nothing has changed and that things are as bad as they always were. This is false. Our current discourse surrounding microaggressions is evidence of both how far we have come as a society, as well as how far we have yet to go. For microaggressions do exist, and they are unacceptable. However, they are also implicitly embedded within us, and it is not yet clear if people will ever be able to completely eradicate them such that new generations are free of their scourge. To my conservative friends, I say this: reorient this discussion as one of choice. Allow different people to make different rational choices, just as one would in a free market. Some people choose physically and non-physically safe spaces. Others choose neither physically nor non-physically safe spaces, and yet others mix and match. Give people a choice to engage or not engage, understanding the caveat that some may have been so hurt by our system that they even lack the capacity to debate with you on the level of which you may be ready. Because of racism, misogyny, and discrimination of all kinds, people are physically and emotionally damaged in this country. Ignoring the damage caused by microaggressions only furthers the divide. To my liberal friends, I say this: do not pursue violence and counter speech with speech. Shutting down the speech of others does not bring an end to injustice. It merely runs it further underground, entrenching hatred. You cannot harm people in the name of helping people, for the ends do not justify the means. Create safety, continue to help people, focus on maintaining bridges that would otherwise be so simple to burn. Ad hominem attacks only set fuel to the fire, and democracy is worth protecting. In our time, we face an unprecedented challenge. We have lost each other. We don't see each other, we don't hear each other, and it's gotten to a point where many people in this country do not care about each other. The rise of Donald Trump is emblematic of this, and perhaps its culmination. If we are to address this fundamental issue, as well as the myriad tests facing our society and democracy, we must start talking to each other again, and more importantly, we must start listening to each other again. Safe spaces, trigger warnings, and microaggressions are not the problem. They're the symptom. What if we stopped fighting over them and started talking in them? What if? Thank you so much for listening to What If. I can't express in words how much everyone at UC3P appreciates you. I want to thank all the students and professors who agreed to be interviewed. I also want to thank the staff at the Harris School of Public Policy, particularly Andrew Dawson and Brandon Kurzweg. Shout out to the Harris Student Government for allowing us to become an organization and providing us with a recording space. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank everyone who worked on this podcast, including Meghna Chandra, who engineered the Stone interview and interviewed students on the quad, Max Hamrick, who also interviewed students on the quad, Jack Coghlan, who moderated the triple debate, Bryce Fields and Matthew Foldi, who participated in the triple debate, Beth Karp, who interviewed Professor Stone and produced interstitial music, Gustavo Gill, who interviewed Professor Kubota, Peter Biava, who produced our introduction, outro, and interstitial music, and my mother, Shirin Raban, who designed our cover art and whom I could never do without. Thank you all so much. Seriously, you're the best. And the biggest thank you of all goes to you, the listeners. My name is David Raban. This is the University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts. And all we ask is that you remember to think, what if?
And that's a wrap on What If. Can't get enough of our podcasts? Well, make sure you tune in to Just China this Sunday for their latest news pulse. It's on the gene-edited babies, the Dolce & Gabbana scandal, US-China trade talks, and more. And this coming Tuesday, we have another episode of Thank You for Your Service coming out. By the way, if you have a moment, why don't you share one of our podcasts on Facebook? The students here at UC3P work really hard to bring you these podcasts, and we all need your help in getting out the good word. That's it for today. I'm Lauren Lee, and we hope you come back next Friday for the next episode of UC3P.